FIDE Master John Curtis, and today what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tribute to John V. Kellner, John Vincent Kellner. He was a New South Wales chess champion on 2 occasions. He tied for first in one Australian championship. He won another one. All the details, or most of the details of some of his illustrious career are included in the notes on the YouTube information list. Now, he was also a great correspondence chess player, and he gave up work at one stage to play in the World Correspondence Chess Championship, and he was really strong. The first game I'm going to show you today is John Kellner against CJS Purdy. That's right, against Cecil Purdy. Now, Cecil Purdy was a 3 times World Correspondence Chess Champion, and he was also, across the board, he was an international master. And Cecil Purdy was, he ran Chess World, and he was noted worldwide for his writings, a journalist. And John Kellner, too, was a journalist, and quite famed in Australian circles as a chess journalist, an avid writer, and a great chess player. I'm talking about John Kellner now. His greatest fame, as far as I can recollect, is that he would create masterpieces in chess, beautiful pieces of artwork. To him, chess was like a painting, like painting a Rembrandt or something like that, rather than being a chess butcher and just sort of chopping a opponent's position up in little pieces to squirrel away a pawn or something, as most masters do. But John was more interested in creating a piece of artwork. Anyway, I'm going to show you 2 games. The first game is Cecil Purdy. He's playing the white pieces, and John Kellner is playing the black pieces. And the game is played in the 1974 Australian Chess Championship, and it's a King's Indian. So let's get right into it. D4, knight to king, bishop 3, and pawn to queen, bishop 4. John Kellner's playing the black side of the King's Indian. Pawn to king's knight 3, knight to queen, bishop 3. Now, this is all theory. Bishop to knight 2, the fianchetto shadow to control the long diagonal. Pawn to king 4, just to try to control the centre. Cecil Purdy was a very classical player. Pawn to queen 3. And now bishop to e2. Okay, bishop to e2. Just preparing knight to f3 and then castling, completing his development. Queen knight to queen 2. In the notes of the Australian 1974 Chess Handbook, it says that it was a bit too committal and castles was better. In other words, it's sort of telegraphing your opponent what your plans are, that you want to play e5. So pawn to bishop 4, but he doesn't. He plays c5, pawn to bishop 4. And now pawn to queen 5 is played. Right. Black castles and says, right, well, I'm happy to castle in this position. He wasn't worried about e5 because he can move his knight back to e8 and just attack the centre. Cecil Purdy just plays knight to f3. Now pawn to queen rook 3 is played. The reason why that's played is sometimes b5 might come into the position as a sort of a wing attack to distract black from the centre. Now Cecil says, well, all my pieces are developed. I haven't castled yet, but maybe it's time to play pawn to king 5. He probably thought that black would take the pawn back. At this stage of his life, Cecil was getting a bit older, a bit longer in the tooth, and the old Cecil might have just castled. But Cecil played pawn to king 5, and now John Kellner correctly plays knight to e8. And now Cecil looked at the position. He thought, well, I don't get much of it after pawn to king 5, pawn to e6. All that's happening is I've got a bad game. So he decided, well, I've taken the wrong route, so I'll just take the pawn off and suffer the consequences and try to play my way out of the position, out of the structurally bad position. But unfortunately, John Kellner was very, very adept at playing these types of games and recaptured with the knight. And white castled. And now knight to knight 3. He just says, I'm just going to develop my pieces and attack your pawn, your c-pawn. And now, you can't protect it by playing pawn to knight 3 because the bishop would then take the knight off. So it's a real problem. The other problem is that white's got this pawn on f4 and it blocks the bishop from going towards the king. And the other problem is that black's bishop controls that square and the knight controls that square. So if it's about square control, black has got everything and white is severely denied any positional play. Queen to knight 3. It's just because he wants to hold his c-pawn. He knows if that falls, then the whole game can fall, right? If the knight's allowed to take the pawn and then b5, then it could be curtains for Cecil. Now here, black plays bishop to knight 5, right, or bishop to g4, and the whole point is he wants to just develop all his pieces, make a square for his castles, connect his back rank, complete his development, and probably play knight to f5 and knight to d4, okay? And of course, if you can take the knight here on f3, then it's even better, because when the knight comes in on d4, there won't be a knight to exchange off his knight. His knight will be dominant. So Cecil plays bishop to king 3. He can see that problems are coming with this knight f5 manoeuvre. So he thought, well, maybe if I can just threaten bishop takes pawn and worry him a little bit. But John wasn't perturbed about the position. He just played rook to c8, completed his development and defended the c-pawn. Cecil completed, he gets all his pieces working now. He plays queen rook to bishop 1. So he's inadvertently protecting this pawn so that he can move his knight here and knight here if he's allowed to. But he's not allowed to because black straight away he takes that knight off and the rook takes the bishop. You can't take with the bishop because of the c-pawn, remember. So rook takes bishop and now knight to bishop 4. Knight to there, threatening knight to d5. Knight to d4. And so now the bishop goes back here to f2 and now the knight comes in. It's a fork. Knight's attacking the queen and the rook. So it's real curtains for white, and his pieces are not connected at all. And so he doesn't really want to lose the exchange. He knows that's too much. So he takes the knight off. And now here, you've got a choice. Bishop takes bishop, check, right? Which would be a good move, but not a great move. Now, pawn takes was played. Pawn takes bishop. And that openly attacks that pawn with the rook. Okay, so now that pawn's under attack, right? And now Cecil decides, well, I've got to move my knight somewhere. Perhaps if I can play knight here, knight there, or something like that. So he plays knight at e4. And now king to rook 1. He played knight to e4, and now knight takes queen pawn. Oh, he took the pawn off. Okay, now you can see why he's captured that pawn. If pawn takes knight, you've got rook takes rook, check. Okay. Now, okay, so that's what the threat was. Now queen takes pawn. So Cecil thinks, well, I've got to counter-attack. Now I'm threatening queen. I'm attacking the pawn. I'm threatening the a pawn, and let's see what black can do. Well, he moves his knight in here, right deep into the white position, and it's very, very difficult for white because that knight cuts the castle off from active play along that square, and it also just makes it very, very difficult for the white pieces. This bishop is really bad because the pawns are on white squares and it can't move around too well. Bishop to queen 3. So he's trying to manoeuvre. Oh, Cecil, he's trying to manoeuvre. Bishop to queen 3. And now rook to b8. Right, so queen takes rook pawn, and now rook takes pawn. After you save your queen, rook takes pawn. He moves his queen back and he attacks the castle. Now, he doesn't play rook takes pawn check, because if he does, after king moves here, rook takes knight's threatened. Then you've got to move your rook again, and there's really nowhere to go. So your rook is virtually almost trapped, and he didn't like that. So he played queen to b8 and he protected his rook. Now he played knight here. He says, oh, I don't like you playing rook takes pawn check. But John, being the artist that he is, he knew he had all the time in the world to get through and to attack Cecil Purdy's position. So he played e4. He wants to open up the game and bring his bishop into play and his other castle to maximise the coordination of his pieces against the white king. And now Cecil says, well, I've got nothing else. I've got a pass pawn. I'll push it. Pass pawn should be pushed. And John says, well, no, I'm playing f5, buddy. He says, I'm coming too. And then Cecil, in time shortage, he probably should play pawn takes pawn. He pushed his pawn forwards. And then rook here, that blocked the pawn. And now if you can look at the bar on the side of the pawn, it says equal. Pawn takes pawn should be played. But white attacked the castle. The castle moves up one square. And now bishop to knight 7. And here, obviously, it's in time trouble. And Cecil would often get into time trouble in his later years. Queen takes bishop. Okay, now the whole idea is if you play pawn takes queen, rook takes rook check, and mate will follow. But Cecil's found a defence. He plays rook takes knight. So it's not quite a checkmate. So now he wants to take the queen. Rook takes knight. But it's a last-ditched effort to complicate the position. Right? So pawn takes rook is played by black. John Kellner takes the rook and he says, well, I'm on your knight with check. Now, if you take my queen, I can still play rook takes rook check and it's mate. So knight to d3 is played. And it holds the rook. And it attacks this rook. So Cecil thinks, well, right, now I'm attacking a whole lot of things. And now rook takes bishop pawn. He just takes that pawn off. He just takes that pawn off. And now the problem is that you'll see what happens here. White plays rook takes rook. Now here, black plays rook takes pawn check. So in other words, black doesn't want to just take the rook and allow white to take a rook. So he takes the pawn with check first. And then when the king takes a rook, because you've got to capture it back, he gets the rook with check. Okay? So the king goes to knight 1. Now we can see it's an overwhelming position for black. And it's just a matter of playing pawn to king 5. And there's a few checks. Queen to knight 3 check. King to bishop 1. Queen to knight 8 check. This is all in time trouble. King to king 2, queen to rook 7 check, queen to queen 2. Now, if you exchange queens, the endgame's completely lost. This is very powerful pawn structure here, okay? So he plays queen to rook 3 check. He doesn't want to change queens. He knows he'd be lost if he does that. The king goes back. He plays another check there, hoping for a perpetual. But after king to bishop 2, there's no more checks. And then knight to king 1's played. And now bishop to queen 5. And that threatens pawn checks, right? So the king goes to knight 2. And now bishop to bishop 4. And the game is over. Black is threatening queen checks and queen checkmate if you try to protect your knight, okay? And then white lost on time. So that was the great John Kellner playing the three-time world correspondence chess champion Cecil John Purdy. Cecil Purdy had a son. He was a good friend of mine, John Purdy, and he too won an Australian championship when he was only 19 years of age. And Cecil was the journalist and the full-time chess player and the world correspondence chess champion. And John became an accountant when he was older, his son, and he also went on to play many great games of chess in his life. He became a justice of the family court and had a full and wonderful distinguished career in the legal services in the state of New South Wales in Australia. Okay, so that's that game. I've got one more game to show you, another Kellner masterpiece. Now that was a positional game, but there's a lot of tactics in it. But the next game that I'm going to show you is a game between the country champion of New South Wales, also played in the same Australian Chess Championship in 1974, and this time it's played white John Kellner and black R. Hill, right? And the game R. Hill is the country champion, and John Kellner plays the King's Gambit, and John was well known for a special line he used to like to play in the King's Gambit and the French defence, funnily enough. He loved to play in the French defence. He loved to play a bishop e7 move as black instead of the knight to f6 move. And similarly in the King's Gambit, you're going to see the same thing by the great John Kellner. Here he goes. e4. Whoops. Yeah, e4. e5. This is a bit of a miniature. Pawn to king, bishop 4. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop to e2. That's the signature move that I told you about. I think what John tried to do is he tried to lull his opponents into a sense of confidence, self-confidence, which he would then try to disseminate, break up, and then chop them up slowly in little pieces. Because basically his position is quite logical, but it does look like it's weak. It does look like black can just play a queen check there. Anyway, Hill knew about this, and so he decided to play d5 anyway. He thought, I won't take the check. I'm just going to play logical mainstream chess. I'm not going to get into John Kellner's pet lines, if you could call it that. I'm going to play classical chess. Anyway, maybe he did fall into a sense of security by thinking like that, because John simply played knight to f3, and now John's got a classical King's Gambit. And he loved it. He thrived on it, as did Trevor Hay, another Australian champion who wrote a book on the King's Gambit, Trevor Hay. He was an Australian champion as well. So knight to king, bishop 3. And now white castles. And white's basically completed the kingside part of his development. And it's going to be interesting to watch how logical John Vincent Kellner plays this game. Remember, he was a blindfold champion too. I think it was the year before this, in 1973, he played 17 blindfold games. So he was quite adept at chess journalism, chess, blindfold chess, correspondence chess, where I think he became about 7th in the World Correspondence Chess Championship. And they used, in the Correspondence Championship, they used to send a move by mail, right? So that was before the internet, obviously. So let's see now. Castles, bishop to d6, just defending the pawn. He thought, well, I'll hold that pawn. And then here it comes, c5, c4. So queen to a5 is played. Now, if you look at this position, John's whole idea, the King's Gambit, is to develop rapidly, hit things, gain tempos, and where possible, mount some sort of an attack. So he's going to build towards it. Now, he sees that he's already achieved one little thing. What has he achieved? He's achieved the fact that the queen has moved away from the king. Okay? So the queen can't run to the king's defence from over there. And also the queen could get belted again, right? And now here comes d4. Now the queen can get belted with bishop to d2. c5 could be played and block the queen off the being able to run back to the king's defence. And Hill notices this, and he thought, well, I know what I'll do. He plays pawn to queen bishop 4. He plays c5. And the whole idea is this way he can get his queen back, if necessary, to the defence of his king. Now, what John Kellner does is he says, well, all right then, I'm happy to concede that you've got that. But your bishop's on a black square. Your queen still hasn't got back to the defence of the king's side. And I'm going to get space, a spatial advantage. I also stop your knight from going to its natural square on c6. Okay? So white achieves a little bit, maybe a little bit more than what black achieves. But it's all about accurate play from here. Here, castles is played, which is good. You get your king into a safe position. Ken Hill. This is Robin. This might be Robin Hill, this one. It's different Hill. I said he might be New South Wales country champion, but no, this is R Hill, not Ken Hill. So unless it's R.K. Hill and they call him Ken. Anyway, we'll just see what happens. Castles. Knight to c3. Okay, so he develops his knight logically, and that counters the fact that that knight goes to that square. Okay, so now we've just got 3 minor pieces developed by white, 2 minor pieces developed by black, and we would say that white's a pawn down, but it's a double pawn. See, it's a double pawn. Okay, so it's probably a fairly equal position. The bar on the side of the board says it favours black insignificantly. Right, pawn to a6 is played, and the whole idea is that stops a knight move, right? And also, so you can play queen back here, and the knight can't hit your queen and the bishop, right? So that's the whole idea behind that move. And now John Kellner decides, well, if I'm playing the King's Gambit, I've got to put my bishop on the attacking square. So he moves it from here, where it's got little scope, to here. Now look at the way one move, all the scope of his bishop is increased in power. Right, it's a line of power. And now black plays rook to e8. He wants to grab, he knows the basics of chess, he wants to grab the open file. But you know what he's forgotten? He's forgotten to develop his pieces. Have a look at the minor pieces here, right? You develop your minor pieces before your major pieces, okay? And here it's here that what white senses that perhaps there's not enough defence around the king, and white might be able to move forward and go on a little bit of a journey. So he plays knight to g5, okay? Now the whole idea, I think, is if the pawn was to hit him here, he'd probably spin back and onto this square and attack the bishop and the knight. And if they exchange, he would take with the other knight and then be able to take his pawn off with f4. And still, these pieces here would be blocked. Still blocked. So, oops, this is here, sorry. We'll go back one square. Yeah, so that's there. Now, so his opponent thinks, well, I better get my pieces working, so I'll attack you and I'll gain a tempo, right? He thought he would gain a tempo. But here, John Kellner says, well, no, there must be something wrong with the position. You weren't supposed to be allowed to do that. So what move have I got? So what move would John play here? Now just think about it for a few seconds. I'll give you a few seconds. I'll count to 5. Did you see the move? Did you think that the queen would maybe go here so that the 3 pieces are lined up on the pawn? No. Well, just remember what the sensei says to the grasshoppers. Examine all checks and examine all captures. Well, there's both of them. Bishop takes pawn check. Now, if the knight takes the bishop, well, the queen can take the attacking bishop here because the knight has been removed from the attack. Okay? So now king to rook 1 is played. Okay? And now white is winning according to the engine. You can see the white bar on the side of the board. Oh, it's an awesome position. So now queen to d3 is played. Now this threatens what? Well, it threatens knight takes pawn checkmate. That's what it threatens. So suddenly white's position has turned into an awesome weapon. However, black's got that lovely queen to bishop too, hasn't he? Where he can hold the f pawn from the checkmate, and he holds his bishop, and so everything looks safe, doesn't it? Right? But what does John Kellner do? He says, Mr. Hill, nothing is safe when you're playing me, and he takes the f pawn off. And you think, well, hold on a minute. Has he lost a bishop? Has he lost a bishop? And now, of course, if you take the bishop, the rook can take back. And you're helping white develop because you can't take that rook. Because if you do, it'll be knight takes pawn check at the end of it all, see? So you can't take the bishop. So you know what he does? He says, well, all right, then I'll admit my mistake and I'll move my rook back and hold the pawn. But you still can't get me, he's thinking. Well, John was thinking, well, I've got more pieces developed than you. You've still got this knight back here on b8, and it looks pretty stupid. So while that's sitting back there, I'm going to take that bishop. This opens my castle to the knight. Okay? So then the queen takes back, right? You've got to recover your piece. And now bishop to bishop 5. Now this move threatens bishop takes bishop, and queen to rook 3 check and mate follows, right? Or bishop takes bishop and queen to rook 7 checkmate. So you've got to take it off, and so he does. Now the rook takes back and threatens rook takes knight. Now you can't take it back with the queen because of the checkmate down here on h7. Okay, so he develops his queen knight to queen 2 to defend the knight. So one knight's taken, he can take back with the other. And finally, white says, well, I've got one piece that's not working. Let's bring that into play. And he plays rook here to f1. And now he's got 2 rooks that attack the knight. And then black resigns. So Mr. Hill resigned the position because he knew that rook takes knight is unstoppable. And queen to rook 3 check too is unstoppable. And the 2 knights would come off and the checkmate would be affected. And the rook can't leave that square because if knight takes pawn check, wins the queen. So everything falls apart. And so John Kellner, the artist, the Renaissance artist of chess, he plays this beautiful King's Gambit game for your enjoyment. If you enjoyed this video, please give the thumbs up if you like the video, and hit the subscribe button. And if you want to see more videos, and you'll be getting notifications from YouTube next time I post a video, so you can enjoy more content. Okay, so again, if you'd like to donate, help my channel, help me make a contribution. My PayPal link is in the video description, as is the a little brief history of the great John Kellner. Okay, once again, thank you for your time. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation, and it's now goodbye from me, and I'll catch you with my next video.